Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Chris Sanchez. And what we're going to do is we're going to spend probably the next minute or so allowing some people to join in. And then after about a minute or so, we are going to actually jump in. We're going to jump into the material. So let's spend the next 60 to 90 seconds allowing some additional people to jump into the meeting, and we'll be right back with you. All right, everyone. As promised, I wanted to allow some additional folks to jump into our webinar that we have for today. But at this point, we are going to jump right into the material. And with that, I'm going to set the stage as to what we're going to cover. We are going to spend most of our time today uncovering how agents and markets can better serve each other and truly deliver some better business outcomes. And so you're going to hear from speakers today like myself. I'm Chris Sanchez, and I am in charge of how agents get better outcomes when it comes to commercial lines growth with respect to Appulate, of course. But we're going to also hear from my esteemed colleague, Johnny Yarborough. Johnny is in charge of how markets can manage profitable growth more seamlessly. And so this is what we aim to cover today. We're going to spend, we'll spend a moment on the relevance of our expertise here at Appulate. That'll be important to kind of lay that foundation, but it's not going to take long for us to really back this up with real data. And that's really where we're going to be spending most of our time today. That's the main event. And so we're really going to get right to it. So here's a peek into our world. More importantly, how we're uniquely positioned to understand the trends that are shaping market agent connections in the world of insurance. And so we're going to learn soon enough how half of agents in our survey prioritize digital tools to help manage their growth. How 83% of agents expect quotes within 24 hours. And so on. And who can really blame them for wanting this? It's ultimately what their customers are demanding as well. And so with these figures in mind, everything that we're seeing here, I'd like to get more, I'd like to explore more and really get more specific on exactly what we're talking about today. And so the key insight here that I wanted to share for agents is that digital ecosystems streamline submissions, quoting and binding, and really meet agents' demand for speed and accuracy. That's the big takeaway here. And that's really what I was mentioning just a moment ago. But there is an implication of all of this, though, and that is on the market side, markets without automation can really struggle to retain agents as agents really gravitate toward faster, more automated options. And so I really wanted to kind of point, like, why is all this relevant? Why does this matter? And so it really comes down to automation and the compatibility of all of this, really reduce redundancies and really position markets as easy to work with, quote unquote, partners. And so that's really what's important here. Ultimately, how all of this ties together, you're seeing agents, you're seeing markets, how all of this ties together as well. Appulate is a tool for both agents and markets. A lot of people do not know this. On the market side, a lot of markets just see their side of things and agents see their side of things. And so it's really important to note that there is a marrying of the two within the Appulate ecosystem, the platform that we've created, where really both sides are getting what they want. And ultimately, it takes a company like us, who are paramountly focused on making commercial lines business flow easier, faster, more accurately, and so on. To really make that happen. And so what we're going to do, at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what agents are saying. We're going to draw some conclusions from that data. And this is data that comes from the largest survey in all of insurance. We're incredibly proud to be a part of it and to share exactly that. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to my teammate, Johnny, who really heads a lot of that. And I'm really excited to share a lot of these insights here, everyone. Johnny, if you could.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chris, and thanks for everybody joining today. Like Chris mentioned, this is now become the largest survey of independent agents that's done in the industry, and we are excited to brag about that. But this is absolutely one of my favorite things because I'm a bit of a geek about data like this, and since Appulate has such a large network of agents using our platform and exploring the different products on here, one of the things that we wanted to tap into was not just, hey, do you like the Appulate system, but what are you prioritizing from markets? What are you looking for from them? What kind of relationships are you looking for? What kind of products are you looking for? Those kinds of things. So I just like to preface all of this data with that because every year now for the 5th year in a row, we put out this information, which we, or this survey, which we're about to do here very shortly. And you guys get an opportunity to get your voice heard. We put this out everywhere, and it really takes hold with a lot of markets on our side of the table here, where I work with markets. So to dive into this a little bit, share a bit of some demographics. Each year that we've conducted this, we get thousands of agents to respond to this, and we try to reach out to as many folks as we can. So we don't want to have a bunch of bias in there with just agents that are using Appulate every day because they may have a bit of a different experience. So luckily, we get a really good turnout from agents all across the industry using different kinds of platforms, and compare that against folks that may be using Appulate. And here's a good example of that, where last time we asked agents if you use Appulate or not, only 37% are using Appulate. So we're trying to remove a lot of bias from these results. And here are the agency sizes. Again, the demographics are pretty broad. So we're hearing from agencies that are pretty substantially large, some that are very small, and we wanted to get a good sense of, are there any differences between a larger run agency and a smaller run agency? And there are some a little bit, but overall, it seems like most agents tend to agree on most things, funny enough. And so we're going to go through some of that data here in just a moment. Chris, is there anything that you have to add to that I missed?
Oh, no, that's beautiful. Thank you, Johnny.
Great. So one of the things I mentioned a moment ago was just getting a better understanding, not just of demographics, but what agents like you guys are writing on a regular basis. And we use this in a couple different ways. So for one, in our platform, because Appulate kind of functions as a submission management system where agents can connect with hundreds of markets across dozens of lines of business, we want to really make sure that we are well represented from a market standpoint and have good markets for you to choose from, whether they're wholesalers, MGAs, carriers, but also products. You may have a carrier that has several different products, and they come to us and say, hey, what's going well on your platform today? And it's always an interesting question because as an example, workers' comp is our #1 line of business in our system. We've got about 130 markets that are available for agents like you to select from. But when we ask agents what lines of business they write, overwhelmingly, commercial auto has taken the #1 spot. And that tells us we need to have more commercial auto, general liability, and BOP products available for agents. So this is really helpful just from our standpoint, but also when it comes to other types of lines of business and maybe even specialty lines, carriers want to get a really good sense of maybe what that distribution potential might look like and how many agents might be interested in something like this. And one of the coolest things that we saw this past year was that over 90% of every line of business saw an equal or greater trend upwards, compared to about 87% last year, telling us that agents are typically exploring new lines of business. Maybe that's cyber liability insurance, for example, where in the past that has not been something that you've offered, and now that it's more accessible, and another way to help your insureds, then now that's something being explored more frequently. Even things like flood insurance, where on top of a homeowner's policy, perhaps agents want to offer flood, and they want to do that in a very simplistic kind of way without having to learn a lot about it or wait for days to get a quote back. And we've certainly seen within our system and within the survey that just generally agents are always out looking for new products and better ways to serve their insureds. And I love to see that. It's a really good trend, a very powerful trend. So when you take the survey, definitely take the time to check off each box for lines of business that you're interested in and consider those other types of lines as well. So I think that's all I've got to say on this slide, Chris.
Yeah, let's continue.
Awesome. So, another good metric here, and a lot of this is to still understand who is taking these surveys. This is really important because, for example, we may want to look at, okay, what is the difference between larger agencies and smaller agencies? What are their preferences when working with markets? Are there certain preferences over certain lines of business? How can we draw some conclusions out of this to better serve the agents that are responding to these surveys? Hopefully everybody on here will get a chance to get into that survey and give us some responses, but everything can be fine-tuned. That's the state of things today with technology. And one of the things that I focused on quite a bit over the last decade is just trying to make sure that there is enough diversity, and not only in product offerings like we looked at before, but also the types of markets. I've noticed more and more that carriers and MGAs in particular have developed better technology. Of course, carriers have traditionally built their own online portal on their website, but agents seem a little frustrated about having to input the same data multiple times in multiple portals. So as a response, markets have developed APIs so that they can deliver real-time quote indications and even a full rate quote bind experience within outside platforms like Appulate, like Vertifor, and with others. And one thing that makes Appulate a little bit different, probably the only time I'll really plug Appulate in here, is that we have really good diversity with market types. So it's not just going to be carriers that we're connecting to APIs, but we're also going to build those bridges over to market portals. We're going to connect to MGAs. We're going to connect to wholesalers. And what we've noticed in this data is that's the right move. It seems like although agents are going to have a strong preference towards a carrier direct relationship, which of course makes a lot of sense, there's been a lot of growth in agents preferring to also work with specialty markets, program administrators, wholesale brokers, MGAs, and then of course all market types, which is really interesting. And then you even have other types of specialty markets like PEOs showing up on this list and growing more and more every year. So it's always really great to see just how much agents are changing their perspectives about working with markets, which seems to tie in really, really closely with how accessible those markets are. And it seems like in the past, the issue's been, well, a lot of manual entry. Maybe working with a wholesaler MGA means filling out supplemental forms or proprietary apps, or going to an online portal, or waiting on a response from an underwriter via email. So with the technology that we've got at our fingertips today, when we can remove a lot of those barriers, and you can have the same level of experience with a small specialty MGA that you could with a Fortune 500 carrier, things look a lot brighter on the agent side, and it's a lot easier to explore different market types as well as different products. So that's what we get out of this. This is what we learned quite a bit about, and why I wanted to share this slide today.
Johnny.
Cool. So the big question a lot of times on both ends, right, that I've heard from agents, and I've heard from even third-party vendors, and especially that I've heard from MGAs and carriers and wholesalers on the market side, is how are these companies finding each other? What is the best way to reach out to an agent to let them know about products? What is the best way for an agent to be able to find a market to work with? If you said, hey, you know what, I do want to write cyber, I'd be very interested, but I'd like to see a few different markets and see what their quote options look like. It can be really tricky to do that. It seems like it'd be easy just to go to Google and type it in, but as I'm sure some of you know, it's not that straightforward, and certainly not going to be that straightforward until you really get into underwriting in some cases. So in this graph, we were just ask agents, what are the best ways that you use to find markets to work with? Referrals is number one. Marketing emails, of course, number two, which makes a lot of sense, but I'm sure if you're like me, you get a lot of marketing emails. And then everything else past this becomes a little bit more strategic. So, of course, we had a lot of folks say that they used Appulate to do that. about 30%. If you recall, we only had about 37% of agents in the survey respond saying that they use our system. So this checks out pretty well, and it kind of goes in line with what I mentioned. If you don't have a referral or existing relationship handoff with a market, using our system is it's pretty successful way to investigate a market, and much more specifically with things like the insured criteria, how it's fitting up against a market's appetite, what kind of questions need to be answered, that sort of thing. What kind of pricing indications can I get? And you're able to see that all in one place. And it's why we've seen Appulate show up pretty high up on the list. Agency management systems have also tried to tie these things in. And again, Vertafore is a good example. I guess I'm going to keep plugging Vertafore, but that makes sense, right? You go into an agency management system, and if you can have the carriers you want to work with right there with you, then it's a good way to find new markets to work with. Everything else you can kind of see on the screen. I'm not going to go through all of these, but it has been a trend that we've seen over the last 5 years that things like quote rating systems, agency management systems, of course, Appulate, and some of these others have risen in popularity as far as methods to find new markets to work with. And it's directly correlated to how much agents are using those types of platforms and embracing new technology. But also on the market side, this has been really, really important, because when I share this with markets, a lot of times it's because they've asked, does it make sense to do this? We've put a lot of money into making our supplementals look really nice, or we've put a lot of money into our online portal, or we're putting a lot of money into social media advertisements and things like that. Why would I develop an API, or why would I connect to a system if I already have a system? And a lot of times this is the answer, right? It's because it's where agents prefer to do business. It's an easier way to do business, and there's a lot more transparency through the process. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot more of that. So if you agree or disagree with this, either way, again, great one for you to pay attention to when you take the survey, and think about the different ways that you actually use to find a new market to work with. And this is what I mean about trends. So, I probably should have said some of what I said on this slide here, because what we did is let's say I took out everything, just kind of condensed it down to some of the main ways, right? So direct outreach, and that could be like phone calls and email outreach. Quote rating systems, I combine Appulate with other quote rating systems and agency management systems, search engines, and social media, and you can kind of see how these things stack up against one another. It was surprising to see search engines raise a little bit and social media raise a little bit. Everything's still kind of within a margin of error of an average there, but direct outreach seems to be the highest. But I'll tell you this, 5 years ago, we're seeing kind of a different picture here, right? So even back in 2021, if we just look at a few years back, you can see how these things have kind of risen very slowly, but they've stayed very consistent. Where search engines have kind of gone up and down, social media has also kind of gone up and down, and direct outreach is kind of done the same thing. There was just 1 year there in 2022 where that was a lot more prevalent, and it seems like there was just a bigger embrace of some of these systems. It also comes with the same kind of territory of, again, markets being able to be compatible with those systems and available. And so as we see more markets do that, there's certainly more utilization of that. By the way, quick side note, if anybody has questions at any time, feel free to use the side panel. There's a little questions bar. You don't have to wait until the end. If you have questions, it's on your mind, just add that question in there, and we'll read it out when it makes sense. So feel free to do that at any time. Sorry, Chris. Was there anything else you wanted to add to this piece?
Oh, that was exactly what I was thinking as well.
Right. All right, so we're really getting into some of my favorite parts of the survey, to be honest with you. So once we've kind of understood, okay, who are these agents? Who are you? What are you writing? Where are you based out of? Just generally, what is the size of your agency, and what ways are you using to find new markets? kind of paints a nice picture of what agents are doing today and what those demographics look like. But then what's really fascinating to me is, okay, so then you're out looking for a new market. What is going to actually capture your attention? What does a market need to do to be competitive in this environment? Because obviously it's not going to just be that they give fast quotes. If they don't have a good price, or they only pay you 1% commission or something like that, maybe that's not going to cut it. But if it's the other way around, maybe it's a great product, but it's so hard to get a quote, or it takes a week to get there through underwriting. It can also make a pretty big impact, and it turns out it's about 50-50. But we've broken it down quite a bit. So part of the survey, we ask, really, what is it that you're prioritizing when you are looking for a new market and when you decide to start submitting to a new market? And we've also asked in other surveys, why is it that you leave your market? And it's really interesting because they kind of seem like the same question, but sometimes, getting into a relationship with a market can be tricky, can be hard. But then even getting out of a relationship has got to be something sometimes pretty serious for you to want to do that. It may be that you just weren't able to sell that product. And in this case, it seems like lack of appetite is number one at about 60%. That's a pretty big spread from the next option. Quote turnaround being too slow. And like I mentioned, if it's taking about a week to get a quote back, maybe that just doesn't cut it. Premiums being too high, which is always an issue, and especially with certain kinds of lines of business, we've seen more than others. But as we go down this, we really start to see a trend, right? And of course, some of the product specific things like appetite and premiums, but the vast majority of these reasons are going to be about speed and ease of working with that market, with that quote turnaround, with faster market alternatives. And maybe there's other markets that are doing instant quote, and you can go to 10 different markets through Appulate in the same time it takes you to go to one market outside of our system, for example. Things like that seem to play a pretty big piece of the puzzle, but then we still want some of the traditional things that we always want as agents, which is, of course, you want some personal service. You want to be able to have competitive pricing and commissions and things like this. But it's really interesting to see how everything stacks up. And on the left-hand side, when you're looking for a new market, it's been interesting to see how instant quote seems to always be number one. Shorter and an automated underwriting process, better forms processing, just being frustrated with having to manually key in data, for example, or deal with various questionnaires and supplemental forms, which is also on the list. Then we get down to better rates, and then we're back into faster quotes, digital questionnaires, and then we get into binding authority and control and better commission. So it's really interesting to see that something like instant quotes could be twice as important to the vast majority of agents compared to something like commission. And it makes sense. Time is money, and being able to service your insureds in a much more accurate way, in a faster way, is going to make you a better agent overall. But it's going to be important for that market, while they're investing in all the cool technology out there, to still provide good personal service and a good product to match it. So that's kind of the message that I like to present on the market side, so they understand that it's not all about just getting the shiny new toy, and it's also not about just having a really good product. You've got to have both of these things pretty equally to make sure that you can catch an agent's attention and retain their business. And I think that's pretty straightforward. But I'm curious, Chris, when you talk to agents, just maybe anecdotally, does it kind of match up with the story that I'm telling here from the survey?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, agents definitely prioritize markets that offer, competitive rates, faster quotes, tech-enabled convenience, market offering. Even when you get into, I mean, you mentioned, you mentioned earlier about, specialty and hard to place lines. And we can see that here, that that's a factor as well. So something like more than half of agents are, kind of willing to move things around for that need to be met. Those are at a glance a couple of trends that I see as well. And so a lot of it tells me that markets expanding their offerings really strikes a balance and meets the needs and the simplification needs that the agent needs out of that relationship. And so I think we're really and that's a lot of what we're trying to talk about today. How do agents and markets really strike that balance and complement each other in a better way?
Yeah, well said.
Yeah. So that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Anything else on this, Johnny? We're probably close to wrapping up here. By the way, everybody.
Great. Yeah, no, I think this is a lot of really good information. What I'll say, just in case I forget to say it, is that if anybody would like to have a copy of this, to take a look at it, or if they want to reach out and say, hey, I agree or disagree, the best way to do that is to take the survey. So we'll make sure that everybody on the webinar, you get first access. What's really interesting is, and I can't stress this enough, markets are in dire need of this information. I'll say it that way. They want it really badly. They want to make sure they're investing properly in their products and programs. They want your business at the end of the day, and not just from a greed standpoint. They want to have good relationships with agents. They truly do. I would say 99% of them I talk to are going to fall into that category, interestingly enough, and they want to make sure that they are in touch with what agents are looking for, and they don't want to force agents into doing things that they don't want to do, because that's going to possibly lose the business. They want to have good products to make available, and make sure they're putting effort into it in the right way. So this is something that they rely on quite a bit. This year, we were able to get an overwhelming response of folks that wanted to sponsor prizes for the survey, because we always give away some good prizes. And this year, no different. I mean, we've had quite a few reach out. I had to say no to some just so it wasn't overwhelming, but we've got about $2,000 in prizes now to give away to random folks who take the survey. So hopefully you'll be that lucky name out of the hat. But either way, I mean, this is an exceptional way to make sure your voice is heard. This is something that was on the front page of Insurance Business America and other things, just for this reason. It's just really helpful information. And as an agent, hopefully this is something that you can also get something out of too, whether it's just understanding what markets are doing, what they're looking for, or what other agents may be doing. And thanks, Ricky, by the way. I saw a little thank you note in the chat, so thank you so much for that. But let's maybe move on to the next slide. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned all of that and the importance of this. So just know that this is not like, hey, we're not just a survey going out saying, hey, do you like Appulate, so we can pat ourselves on the back. It's really mostly nothing to do with Appulate. It's really to understand what is it that drives your business, so that we can make sure that the industry is more competitive in your favor.
100%, Johnny. We really just want everything to be a win-win. So, both agents and markets are really winning by working well together. So yeah, what I'm going to do, Johnny, is I'm going to throw up like a thank you message with our contact information. I got a couple things to kind of high level sum everything up. But this is awfully close to the conclusion of our webinar today, everyone. So there we go. Couple things that I wanted to share just to tie everything on a nice little bow. Put a nice little bow. We're all about making, Appulate, we're all about making underwriting more automated, quicker, and keeping the accuracy that's needed, of course. But we saw earlier how, something like 73% of agents are really telling us that, manual processes will shy them away from really interacting with that particular market. And so really to capture agent loyalty, and Johnny said this minutes ago, but I'll say it in my own words, in my own mind. To really capture the loyalty of agents, markets really need to align their capabilities with agents' needs for really like short effort, short burst, high efficiency sort of processes. This is my shameless plug with Appulate as well. Johnny mentioned that earlier, but that's really where we come in. That's really where Appulate comes in when it comes to short effort, quick burst, high efficiency processes at scale when it comes to marketing submissions. And so And if we think about it, all of this is because the interaction between agents and markets is really transformed in a big way, and all of these survey results that we're seeing are really providing hard evidence and really sort of a fact-based sort of approach to how we can marry those two environments together. That's pretty much it from me, Johnny. Anything else that you want, any other color you would like to provide here before we, of course, open it up for questions and wrap up for the day?
No, I mean, I'll just reiterate that this is coming out again soon. So make sure you guys are watching out for it. If you see an email coming your way about taking the survey, we are going to be launching it this week. So we typically conduct it over the next, I would say, 4 weeks. So make sure you get a chance to do it. Share it with folks at your agency too. I mean, we want to hear from as many folks as we possibly can. There are ways to put your own comments in there and suggestions. So if there are things that you wish that you could share with markets that we didn't ask, any feedback is good feedback there. So make sure you take some time and go through it. And it take it seriously, because this stuff is being taken seriously through the industry. So looking forward to participate in that. And if there's any other questions or thoughts that you guys have after this webinar, always feel free to reach out. But this is also a good moment. So yeah, Chris, happy to take any questions.
Excellent. So what we'll do is we'll spend a few moments reviewing the questions. I don't have very much quite yet, but we'll hang out for a minute or so, for a few minutes or so, and answer any questions that you might have. And then when it makes sense, I'll kind of announce that we'll wrap up for the day and shut it down. It looks like Donna. It looks like Donna has a question. She has her hand up, and I don't see anything in the question box. And so I was gonna take you off mute, Donna. I assume that maybe a question, audio question might be a little bit better, judging by that. So I'll take you off mute and go to ask your question. Oh, actually, it says that you are muted on your end. Okay. Any ideas there, Johnny? I don't think there's anything we can do about that.
Yeah, probably the best thing to do would just be to type it into the question bar. You might be able to unmute, but yeah, it's a little tricky on here, especially when we have so many folks. So the best way would be to put a question in the question box there. Sorry to make you type, but
and we'll hang out here for a while, Donna, if you want to.
I definitely like that. One question I get is do we survey markets? I'll tell you that. And so we do 3 surveys through the year that are pretty big. So one that's coming up right now this week is our annual survey. We call it our annual holiday survey, just because it's kind of fun and we get to give away a lot of cool stuff. But in the summertime, I like to conduct 2 other surveys. One that goes out to agents, again, with some different kinds of questions, and one that goes out to markets, and I investigate the market side as well. And so if you're interested in seeing some of the results from that, definitely shoot us an email. Happy to send you the report on it. It's pretty interesting. I mean, we see some really good feedback from markets, and we see some things that are different. One of the things I ask markets is based on some of their assumptions about agents. Like, what do you think is the most important thing that agents are looking for the product? And it's fascinating to see their responses, where those responses line up with where agents are, where they feel like they've got a good handle on what agents are looking for, and in some cases where that's not so much the case. And asking things about their investments in the future. How much are markets actually implementing things like APIs and using artificial intelligence and things like this? So it's pretty cool to watch that all kind of unfold as well and compare the results. So that's always a good question that I get, and happy to share a report on that. Oh, by the way, we give it all away for free. I should just tell you this. I should have said this up front. And we don't make any money off the survey. So yeah, that there's a reason for that. I want to make sure everybody has access to it. So feel free to reach out. No one's going to try to ask you for money.
Yeah, that's really important to note as well, Johnny. Thank you. That's good plugging that in.
Yeah. Hey, and thank you, Samantha. Had another little thank you there. Hey, not a lot of questions, but definitely a lot of uh, thank yous and love in the questions. I appreciate that too. So um, yeah, appreciate it. That's great.
And hopefully, Johnny, that just means that we did such a good job communicating our message today. There are no questions, so
Wonderful.
positivity around that. So
Sounds good. Well, great. Well, hey, I hope to see everybody on that survey. And by the way, you can take it anonymously. You don't have to put your information in there. We don't give it out. So I want to make sure you guys know all that. And yeah, be on the lookout for it. And hey, Chris, thanks for hosting this and doing this together.
of course, yeah, right on. We'll spend, I'll give it another 30 seconds or so, but we'll shut down the webinar for today here fairly soon. And echoing what Johnny just said, thank you as well for joining us today. We're really excited to get this information out there to everybody to help provide some more insight, make some better business decisions, really help improve and grow your agency. And exactly what Johnny said, please, get involved in that New Year survey. It's a really big piece that helps both sides, both agents and markets, in a big way. One last thank you to everybody. We'll shut down the recording for today. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.